Ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourselves for another exhilarating episode of Tea with ALSA. I'm your host, eager to serve up a potent brew of insights with our brilliant guest today. We've got Keidi Kapllani in our thrilling hot seat, an alumnus of Imperial College London, where he kindled the spark of Kuo along with his co-founders. This startup focuses on gauging emotions across digital activity for brands rather than merely observing vanity metrics. Now, as the CTO, he's here to share a slice of his intriguing journey with us. So grab your cuppa, get comfortable, and let's kick off this mind-blowing tea party. And so, how long have you now been in the UK? Was it since university? Is that correct?
Just before that, actually, I came here to do my sixth form. So it's been just north of a decade. Yeah, I think it was 10 years last August. So it's just north of a decade. It doesn't feel like it, if I'm really honest. But yeah, I came to the UK at 16. I managed to get a scholarship for a sixth form in IB, International Baccalaureate. And then from then on, I went to a UK university. I went to Imperial, got my master's degree, and followed on in the job market, and then following that in the entrepreneurial market as well.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess going from university, what did you study at university for the listeners? Because there might be some people who wanna, maybe they want some advice on what to study. What did you study?
So I went for electrical electronic engineering. I was, to be honest with you, I was probably one of the few who knew from the beginning that I was going to do engineering in the beginning of high school. It was very common and very normal for people to sort of go in those last 2 years trying to figure out, okay, I have this skill set. How should I apply it? What's the better path for me and everything? But I tried to look around, but ultimately, with what I like to do and how I like to spend my time, engineering was the one that made most sense.
Yeah. And then from engineering, you did a master's straight away.
Yeah, so I did an integrated master and an MEng. So it was a 4 year course uh, with, uh, yeah, they gave us also a 6 months industry experience, which was really good. And I actually highly recommend for anybody who's willing to consider it. It's basically gives you a guarantee that you finish university with a 6 months industry experience, which can be really valuable for your first job.
Yeah. And then from leaving that, was it you did the 6 months experience, and then did you go straight into entrepreneurship because you were like, hey, listen, I need to be doing stuff myself here, or how was it?
Well,
What was
actually,
the six
yeah.
months experience? Was it were you there like, I don't like working for other people.
Well, it was not that as much. It's a funny thing, actually. So the 6 months experience happens during the third year, the second half of your third year.
Hmm.
So you do 6 months and then you come back to uni and you do your last year. And then that 6 months placement offered me a job opportunity and I took it immediately, to be honest with you. Not only because I felt like it was a job opportunity, but that was a 20% that, as you know, we need the visa to be here. It's hard to get jobs that have sponsorships. So that felt like a good starting stone, like a good stepping stone to the job market. But what made me leave that not too long after was the first job I was working for Schlumberger, which is an energy company. It's a large oil field service provider and they're a massive company. They had something like 100,000 people all over the world, and the corporate infrastructure that they had at least sort of stifled innovation. So I went there off the back of uni, having played with a lot of high-end stuff. I went there to a fixed process which hadn't been changed in 15 years, and I was itching to improve it. I was itching to change it, and it wasn't really in the plan of or my job description. But I did have a really good experience. I did still learn a lot. Had some really great colleagues, and I think yeah, that was something that I know people who have gone straight into entrepreneurship, but having seen the other side before just makes sure that when you're having those dips, when you're like, this is really hard, why did I get into this? This is really stressful. You're like, I could go and do that, but I tried that and I didn't like it.
Mm.
So you sort of know you're in the right path when you've tried a bit of the other side. At least that's how it was for me.
Yeah, no, I think that's very important. I think most young people or students leaving, they're probably looking at what should I do? Or I think a lot of the times they want like a distinct answer straight away, where
Yeah,
probably you would say the same thing as much as I would, which is like focus on more like gaining as much experience as you can within those first few years, and then from there you can make a better decision, rather than being like, hey, out of uni I want to get the best job straight away. It was like
yeah, yeah,
very,
and
very
it
unlikely.
absolutely, and I completely agree. And it's really hard, it's really hard as a 21 year old. You're eager to get in there and just to find the perfect fit. But I think using your 20s for experiences, in my opinion, is the best you can do. If you manage to get a few opportunities, explore as much as you can. The sort of the new age job market is one where everybody's expected to move within 1 or 2 years. Before, it used to be like you go in a job, you're there for 10, 15, 20, 25 years. It's different now, in my opinion, for the better. So you get the opportunity to try a lot of things. Not to mention that I feel like obviously the UK and London specifically offers an insane amount of opportunities. So even if you have the answer, there's so much stuff out there that without trying physically, I don't know how anybody can find the answer. So yeah, if I would have one advice for my 20-year-old self, 21-year-old self would be just go and try. Just go and try it. You can leave in 6 months, you can leave in 1 year, you can leave in five, or maybe you don't leave because you like the environment so much, and there's just so many variables that without trying, I don't know how you could answer that fully, basically.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a very interesting, I guess, insights for young students. But I guess going back to you now, I guess co-founding a startup. Do you still consider yourself a startup, or are you more? Where would you a small business? Because people consider themselves differently at different stages.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. I think we still consider ourselves a startup. I believe we're still early in our journey. It feels like it's been a while. It's had its ups and downs. It's been very exciting, very fulfilling, very stressful at times, but we're definitely still early in that stage. I think I've been with the company since it got founded, to be fair, but it's still
I mean,
to
that's given in the title, right?
yeah, that's good.
Co-founder.
Yeah, I think I started, and that's an interesting fact actually. So I started my first job uh, off the back of uni, right? So September of, I think it was 2019, and then about a month later, or maybe in the same month, I'd been approached by two friends from uni that they were starting to play around with this technology and this little project. And then we started doing that in our spare time since the beginning. And that's probably what drove me really quickly to the entrepreneurial world. Because after work, I was playing with a few things. We were trying out some stuff, and then a couple of months down the line, I think this was probably mid-pandemic because the pandemic gave us a lot of time to by ourselves at home. And when that hit, we sort of like I used that opportunity to play around with it a bit more and try to work with my co-founders more. And that's when we realized that this is a business. We've got a business here. And then we started doing sort of a pre-seed fundraise, and then we sort of jumped into it. It was a bit of a high risk strategy, but it's paid off so far, so I can't complain. But we went full time straight away. We quit our jobs, and then yeah, we've been doing that since, which I think is yeah, it's almost 3 years now.
Now, how did you tell your mum that you quit your job to go into something very risky?
Well, I like to break it down to my parents in stages, right? So I like to
What was the
mention it
first stage?
before.
Let's give people some advice. What's the first
So
stage?
the first stage that I would do was basically I'd mention that I'm doing this really cool thing on my spare time, right? And then a couple of weeks go by and I'm like, oh, we've gone to some events, So it's a stepping stone. You don't want to hit them with the whole
Okay,
thing,
yeah.
and but yeah, that's what I did. One of the things that, for example, I think this might be important for students or people looking to get into entrepreneurship as Albanians, is that you need a special kind of visa. It's called a startup visa or an entrepreneur visa.
Mm.
And once I could only jump full time once I guaranteed that. So sort of it wasn't, I had to de-risk that before I was able to go to my job and be like, listen, guys, thank you very much for the opportunity, but I got something going, and they were very understanding, to be fair, um, which is I don't think they had a lot of option, to be fair with you, but
Yeah.
yeah, they were actually supportive, and yeah, I parted in good ways, that's to say. But yeah, definitely break it in stages. I don't. Maybe there's people out there who have extremely good communication with their parents. I think I have good communication, and I still went for the safe option.
Yeah, that's good.
So
And your parents, are they back home in Albania?
yes, they're back home in Albania. Yeah, yeah.
Very, very, very nice. Have you ever tried explaining your startup to your parents and they're just like, yeah, don't bother?
I Well, I have, but I see that mostly on my part, not being able to explain it that well. So I believe that when you know something really well, is when you're able to explain it
Mm.
like a 5-year-old or to a 5-year-old. That's when you have the core understanding. And our parents, basically, Albania is not possibly as exposed to some of the tech stuff as here. So I think they get it now. I think they understand what we're trying to do. But there's another thing that, as a startup, what you're not trying to do, but what you do and like how you approach it, especially in the beginning, sort of changes every 2 weeks, right? Or
Yeah.
if it's not, you're probably doing something wrong because you start off with an idea and then you need to validate, and you need to do about 15 iterations of that before you're actually into something that's stable.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess moving slightly back to what we were talking about, when you started, you were with your friends and then you co-founded this business together.
Yeah.
How did you guys, I guess, agree on the business, but then also the task? Because I think there's a lot of times where people want to start businesses with their friends, but they don't know how to, I guess, dissect who does what, who's in charge of what, and then it gets messy. How did you guys deal with that in the beginning? Because it seems to be working out really well now.
Yeah.
But was there any like strifes that you guys went through, or did you know, hey, this is how it's going to be laid out from the beginning?
That's a really interesting question. I think we sort of fell in place, right? Like we're sort of lucky that between the three of us we have a very wide range of skills. I, for example, always knew that I was going to be on the technical side, and Sean, uh, the co-founder and the CEO, knew that he was more the business side because he had that vision, he had that understanding of okay, how do we package this technology as something that's sellable? And then Elias, the other co-founder, was the one who had to do a slight shift along the way. He went from chief data officer to chief operations officer. And by the way, I don't like to use the title chief because we're a 6 people team. I feel like it's a bit over the top, but that's the title. And but that move was very, very natural, right? Like it goes hand in hand with the needs of the business essentially. But the one thing that it was clear is that we sort of fell into place straight away. It's possibly what has helped us, not have any issues so far.
I mean, that's good. That I mean, when you kind of fall straight into place, there's less resistance to
Mm,
changes being made, and you guys can adapt very, very quickly.
yeah.
And I guess that like you're a six-person team. How is it when you are involving other people who aren't your friends into that business now?
Uh, well, that's learning to hire in a startup or learning to hire in general is quite a large skill set, in my opinion, and a very important one. It's one that I had to learn, coming from a purely tech background. But I imagine I don't know anybody who has a natural instinct for hiring people. Um, One of the things that we have tried to do is that we have tried to hire obviously people with common values of ours, right? So in the beginning, we did quite a lot of work in defining like what are our values, what are our do's and don'ts, like what do we value, what can we tolerate, what can't we tolerate, and then we tapped into our network a lot in the beginning, like it's really hard to hire somebody when you're just 3 people. So you're bringing somebody along for a journey. You're sort of giving them a piece of what is your baby. So it's a difficult decision, but we've been in that sense. I like to say we've been lucky again as well. We have. I feel like we have an amazing team, and We've managed to sort of tap into our own networks. So far, for example, everybody in the team is somebody who we've known briefly in a social aspect before, which always helps because I don't know how I would be able to hire, our first hire without knowing them thoroughly, with 3 interviews or 4 interviews or 5 interviews, which really helps. And then you can utilize different strategies. I know, for example, founders who like to take them out for drinks, for socials, see how they're, see how the communication is, see how the fit is. Um, there's obviously like a period where it's I can't remember the name right now, what's it called, but um, where you're trying to figure out both on their side and on our side if it's a good fit. But yeah, that's what I'd say. Again, one advice: try to tap into your networks, your university networks, your personal networks. Um, but we're also lucky to all have been in London, which is sort of a massive city where sort of you can create that network fairly easily.
Yeah. No, I mean that makes a lot of sense. Utilizing, I guess, people you can trust because you're still at that stage, like you said, 6-man team, right?
Yeah,
The culture is probably like one of the most important factors next to the product and making sure money comes in because,
yeah,
this is something I've had conversations with loads of people where it's the people create the business, not the other way around, especially in the
yeah,
startup because, you know, who made Apple? It was, well, Steve Jobs and all the people
yeah,
working there, right? Um, but with that being said, and kind of moving towards the interview side of things, I guess from your perspective, because you're now on the other end where you are interviewing loads of people, what is some advice you would give to like students who are interviewing and they've just left uni and they want to impress, maybe they're interviewing at a startup. Uh, what is stuff they could do to impress a founder or co-founder?
yeah. Now, I'd have to say, in the beginning of the journey, I'm going to take a little detour. It was really
Go ahead.
shocking to go from being interviewed to being the interviewer. So something that I think students uh, should know is that possibly in a small startup or even in mid-sized startups, the interviewer is as nervous as they are, because it might be their first or their second time interviewing. This is not corporate. They don't have HR guidelines. They've sort of come up with a process with a few from the team, and they're trying to do their best. But one of the main things that we look for is passion, but not passion for our company. It's sort of the application of that passion, right? So there's obviously the technical skill, and I'm going to talk here mostly about technical hires because that's what I've sort of had exposure in. There's a technical background which needs to be there, but then there needs to be an element of, listen, this technical background that you have, you actually enjoy doing this, right? Like you do some stuff on your own. You're sort of informed of what's going on in the industry in general. You have a spark. You have something that drives you forward because different from corporate, you can't really, or maybe if you just want to sit down and do the task assigned and follow your work, probably startups are not where you'd want to start. That's mostly what a corporate entity would want. A startup gives you a bit of that freedom to not only to innovate on yourself, to learn, to get involved in different sides of the business. Like one things that we like to do with the team is, for example, we're open to ideas on the business side from everybody and on the tech side from everybody. We have these meetings called all hands where we try to basically get everybody involved, get everybody on the state of the business, what's going on all sides, so we can sort of foster innovation from throughout the whole team. Because it's interesting how much industry agnostic ideas can become important in the industry. Like viewing business problems as tech problems gives you innovative or different ways of going at it than just when you're in that framework of, oh, this is a business idea we need to sell. Sometimes it can be really powerful to incorporate sort of strategies from other sort of sides of the business.
Yeah, that reminds me of a really good book that was recommended by Warren Buffett called The Outsiders. And it
Yeah,
talks about, in similar vein to that, how off the topic of using different mindsets for those transferable aspects of a business where, like you said, if we're looking at it from a business perspective and we're just always approaching it from like a business administrative
Yeah,
perspective, we might reach the same outcome as all the other businesses. However, if we approach it from that tech or data or operations or financing background, we will see different results.
yeah,
And that book
exactly.
gives like loads of various examples of companies who have your non-typical co-founder, non-typical CEO, who weren't the, nice suit, smiling, charming guy. They were, they were still good, but very different. And that is what led to them like seeing success in their business. And I mean, even now, if you look at Apple, for example, and I've heard this said before as well, if you look at Tim Cook came from a finance background. His
Yeah,
whole thing is innovative through finance. The contracts he sets up with all the companies in Taiwan, that's what allows them to make massive profit margins. Very
yeah,
different to
yeah,
Steve Jobs, which is a very much design focused approach.
absolutely. Sorry, and Cook is the one who moved Apple from a hardware business to a services business, right? Like they moved when he became CEO. That's when they started their migration to actually we sell services. We sell Apple Upgrade Program or the iCloud, all of that. That's where they make their money from nowadays.
Yeah,
So yeah,
and
that's exactly it.
exactly, and maybe that wouldn't be the case with someone like a Steve Jobs, who's hardware design focused. His presentations were always about slick, cool marketing, whereas
Yeah,
like we just said,
yeah,
Tim Cook was very different. It was where can I cut margins, where can we still make profit, X, Y, Z. No,
yeah,
that's very very interesting. I mean, I guess kind of just jumping away from interviews and more into your business. It would be good to get like an insight, I guess, for the listeners. I guess what you guys have been up to over the last year, and what you guys are looking forward to in the future. What sort of tech is on your mind, as well as someone who does work from a more technical background. Is there anything that excites you? So, yeah, give us an update on what you guys have been working on.
yeah. So it's been an interesting year, not only you know due to us or for our merit, but due to the industry as well. As you might know, there's been some little shakes and little earthquakes here and there on the startup world. But no, we've had a very very good year so far, and I'm counting not calendar by the way, so I'm counting 1 year back. We are now ready to launch our first product online, which is very exciting. Our analytics platform, which basically will give product companies and product teams the ability to understand and engage users' emotions, and will give the users in turn the ability to make their technology, react to their emotions. So we went through TechStars, which is a very large accelerator program, back in I think it was in September, and that's something, by the way, that I would recommend to a lot of new entrepreneurs and founders is if you if you sort of are stuck, don't know where to take the business in the next steps, joining or being part of accelerators is a great way to get access to a vast network of investors, industry clients, and mentors as well. But basically, yeah, we're just gearing up. It's about to be a very busy period. We're gearing up to launch our product in about 2 months' time, with a couple of clients, and we're really excited. And on the tech side, that means that we really need to build fast and precise for the next 2 months. But yeah, sorry, I sort of lost the second part of your question, but
The second part was, I guess, going to be more into I guess, where the tech industry is moving. What are you excited about from your perspective? Has there been any? Because I mean, there has been quite a lot of changes, not only from tech, but also everything around tech with finances, VCs closing down, all
yeah,
that fun
yeah,
stuff. So,
yeah. I mean, we actually just closed the funding round. That's why sort of it was a bit of a stressful period because that did affect us. Luckily, not too much. But we're now happy to be in a position where we can put our heads down and focus on product and sales going forward. And getting that product in the hands of first few clients is as exciting as it's stressing because as any product, it's not going to be perfect. They're going to come back with this doesn't work. This needs to be different, and that's just part of the process. But we're excited to put it finally in the hands of real life clients. We've had, pilot projects, and we've worked with a few big brands in edtech and in gaming. We did a little project, for example, last year with a large um, a large gaming UK gaming company. They had released a game and they wanted us to sort of see how we could help them understand why their tutorial was not doing as well as expected, and we got some really interesting results. And then with another large edtech company, and this edtech company is Memrise. It's second biggest company after Duolingo. I don't know if you know it, and they'd released a chatbot, right, based on GPT-3, the AI model before GPT-3 was extremely popular and
Mm,
mentioned 5 times a day
yeah.
in any tech environment. So sometime last October, November, and basically what this chatbot allowed you to do is it allowed you to learn languages by talking to the bot in the language that you chose, right? So you instead of going through sort of pre-decided lessons or slides, you would chat in various scenarios with the bot, and then it would help you understand. You could translate it, you could tell it, okay, tell me this in English, and so on. And then we help them validate that basically users prefer to talk to chatbots other than other people native in the language that they're trying to speak because it's less stressful, right?
Mm,
So when you're trying to learn a language in the beginning, you're a bit stifled, you're unsure, and there's an element of maybe being shy. Whereas when you're talking to a computer, all of that goes away. So people prefer that. And in terms of what tech I'm looking forward to, there's definitely, I mean, it can be anything else than AI, really, right?
I feel
Like,
like, are you? Sorry to jump in, but
yeah,
do you remember like a year ago where Web3 was talk of the town,
yeah, yeah, I do. Yeah, I
and
do. Funny
and
enough, yeah.
and
And then
and then
summer
everyone
came
was like,
along, and
yeah,
then,
this is gonna
yeah.
be it's gonna change everything.
And again,
What?
it might still be, but
Yeah,
it sort of took a back seat at the moment. Yeah, sorry, go
yeah.
on.
What I was gonna say, what would separate AI from, I guess, the Web3? Because I mean, I've got some ideas of what could separate it. One of them being there's actually something tangible. But yeah, what do you reckon would separate
My
it from Web3?
So sort of my
The
personal
hype,
opinion
I
on
guess.
Yeah, my personal opinion is that AI will go slightly slightly through a similar journey that Web3 went, because I see the Web3 journey as the journey of the early internet, for example. So there was an internet boom in the late 90s when we were very young, so we weren't maybe like quite there. But if you read about it, there was a huge boom, and then there was the dot-com crash in 2000, 2001, and that's where everybody was like, "Oh, internet just isn't going to be a thing." And then they sort of bounced back slower this time, right? So they started off really high, and then they had to sort of get a reality check. And then that's when you started seeing the social media platforms, the communications, the Instagrams, the Facebook. I think Web3 and possibly AI will go through a similar journey. So I'm not aware, or I don't know of any products or technologies that got adopted as fast and lasted, as AI is doing. Like it was only, I think, December that ChatGPT was released. Sorry, yeah,
Yeah,
December.
yeah,
And then it feels like it's been there for a year because it's so everywhere. And I've seen people have started building really really interesting stuff with it. I just think that it takes a bit of time for it to be adopted in really high scale, in really like high production environments like finance or industry or control industry, stuff that needs to be reliable.
yeah.
And
Well, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. I feel like I cut
yeah,
you
I
off
was
there.
just gonna say one of the issues right now with those types of models, and again, this is my opinion based on the knowledge that I have from one of my co-founders, Elias, who used to do a PhD in this sector, is the robustness of the models, right? Like they can be really good, but there's no way to validate that what they're saying is authentic, is true, or that they produce reproducible results with the same prompt, right? Which is really important when you're trying to use technology. Um, so that's sort of until they figured that out, and I think it's called the field of AI research, and that is called fairness. So fairness and robustness, and how to understand what those models are doing in the background, because they right now they just have sort of billions of parameters doing little mathematical equations really fast, and then predicting word by word what they should tell you.
Yeah, sorry, something just happened in the background here, but don't worry about that. There we go. Perfect. That will be edited out. See, I told you. There's always an issue somewhere.
Yeah, well, in
Uh,
Albania we say it's for good luck, don't we?
oh, perfect. I might even just leave it in. What was I going to say? Yeah, so the other thing that I was going to mention about AI is how, yeah, you're completely right. It's what are those parameters? And I think something loads of people have noticed with even Chat GPT is it's really good at certain stuff, but if you try get it specific at times, it could either go really well or it could go really wrong. It could just give you the wrong answer with the
Exactly. Yeah.
best confidence in the world. It will be
Yeah.
like, here's the answer, and it'll be like, nope, you are wrong,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
it will act as if it's correct. But I do feel like there's tests with Bloomberg and loads of companies who, and this is where I feel like it's not only AI is just a part of it, but data and then Web3 as well is also going to be a big part of it
Mhm.
because companies who have priority data, uh, they'll be able to utilize their own data with AI models to provide accurate responses to prompts, right?
Yeah.
And because it's your own data, that's what's going to be more important. And I feel
Yeah.
like data is going to also, because of AI, data is going to be another big thing because AI is going to need data. Without the data, it can't really.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, definitely the large language models, which is like GPT, Bard, and Llama, I think from Facebook right now, those rely on data, right? And they've scraped massive amounts of data, and they've done possibly quite a lot of cleaning. Nobody knows how much, nobody knows how good that data set is, but they've done that. And it's interesting that you mentioned Bloomberg because, yeah, I know that they released their own proprietary model based on their own proprietary data. And yeah, I tend to agree. But even there, even if you have the data, in my opinion, even if you have the data perfectly clean with real information, there's no guarantee that the model will mix it up in such a way that is truthful or valid all the time. You know?
Mm.
So you can't give, in my opinion, a financial model to a trading floor that sometimes doesn't work without you knowing. That's just that's a recipe for disaster. And the financial industry is known for adopting tech late precisely for this reason because they need it to be extremely robust. For example, some of the banking technologies that we use, Barclays and co, still use software from 30 years ago. Why? Because it reliably works. It's written in languages that a handful of people may understand nowadays, but uh, it's a requirement, and for most industries, it is a requirement. Like you sort of can't do your job with something that is sort of not glitchy, but temperamental.
Yeah, it's not completely there yet. You need it
It's not
to have
exactly, yeah,
have its stability. Are you now when it comes to AI? There's I feel like you go online, you get various different what do you call groups, right? You
yeah,
get the oh my god, Skynet, turn off the internet.
yeah,
And then you get other people who are like, like bring on Skynet. I want to not do anything and I want AI
yeah,
to do
yeah.
something. Now, I know where I sit with this. But what is your thought on this? Do you agree with like Elon Musk and some other tech leaders discussing in discreet to like slow down the development of this?
So my position is actually very dynamic these days. I'm still trying to figure it out,
Yeah.
possibly because I feel there's an overload of information on it. Like you said, I follow a couple of technical forums, and it's now AI one every two, three posts, and how to do this in AI, and look at these 250 products that were built in a week. And I'm like, where do people like? How many people were just ready for the models to start building stuff? Feels like people were waiting for it, and then they got the signal and they started. But I don't fully agree with the letter. I haven't read it in its fullest. I've just read articles about it.
Yeah.
It basically, I think, goes along the lines of, "Oh, we don't know what we're doing. We should stop." Whereas I think going forward, AI will, not sure for the better, possibly for the better, start getting regulated like other pieces of software, right? Like one of the things that I struggle to understand with with ChatGPT is that they scraped data which is licensed for free use, right? They scrape the internet, and a big thing in tech is that when you use somebody else's code, it comes with a license. They can either open source it, like license it, and there's actually about 150 of these licenses, but they can either open source it for you to use freely and do whatever you want, or they can license it such that you can only use it with software that will be open source, so you can't use it in commercial aspects. And this was before ChatGPT was released. Microsoft released their own sort of version of it called Copilot, which is
Right.
basically a programming tool that helps you autocomplete, but to the next level. So you tell it to build something and it builds it. And I think they're now in one or multiple legal cases because they scrape data off GitHub, which is a source repository for code, the biggest, owned by Microsoft, but of people who had licensed it as open source, right? So there's one of the things that AI undoubtedly did was it it opened the it opened the
Pandora's
discussion.
box.
Yeah, the box exactly. And then once that's opened, I don't know of any time in history when he was successfully closed and paused. That's where my thing with the letter stems. I think if the letter, and I think they do, ask for better regulation, for checks, balances, and all that, that could be more. I don't know, possibly more. It might be that that's how they implement it because it was just an open letter, but I don't think it's realistic in practice to stop building large language models for 6 months because I don't like if I start building them with my laptop and there's now models by the way that you can build with your laptop. What is somebody going to stop? Like how are they going to? There's so many questions, but I think it started a discussion on okay, this is a new technology, possibly on par with the impact that the internet had. How do we deal with this? And you know very well that took years and decades to figure out how we regulate the internet, and they're still working on it. There's new bills and new laws coming in and out about identity online and data privacy and all that. So I think it opened the discussion, which will go on for a while and will improve as we go forward. But yeah, I don't personally believe that you can, in practice, stop that in 6 months,
Yeah.
for 6 months.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it felt like a little bit like, oh, Elon Musk, let me just say something good because I've been an arsehole on Twitter for recently.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
he's a sensitive topic. I don't. Yeah, as somebody in tech, I see goods and bad sides of him. He's just he likes to be controversial, I think,
yeah.
and I think he might have a person because uh, OpenAI started as a non-profit, right?
Yes, I've heard about this, and he
Yes.
donated or
Yeah, he
something, or did he
donated something.
invested, or I'm
He
not
do, I
sure.
think he donated something to the tune of 100 million,
Yeah, yeah,
together with other
yeah.
benefactors. And then 2 or 3 years ago, they sort of reshuffled, and then they were a for-profit. And actually, when I first read it, I was like, "Oh, that sounds like is that doable?" And nobody has raised the flag so far, so
Yeah.
maybe it is actually doable. But yeah, so they said they did it. As far as I know, I don't want to spew misinformation. As far as I know, they said they did it to be able to attract more investment. And then
Mm.
shortly after they did that, I think Microsoft invested a large,
Yes.
large sum in them,
I think
something a billion, I think.
yeah, either a
Yeah,
billion
that's
or 2 billion, or
yeah, something like that. One of those
something
numbers
for a
that
nice house.
yes, one of those numbers that you can't actually conceptualize. Like
Yeah,
you hear it as a thing, it's like, oh, it's 2 billion money, but then like it's a huge amount of money.
yeah.
Anyways, yeah, so they did that, and he might he might be unhappy about that. He might have his own personal reasons. I'm not sure. Um, There was, interesting enough, there was Steve Wozniak in that letter as well,
Yes.
right? One of the co-founders of Apple, and he was also concurring basically with that letter. I think it's, yeah, I genuinely don't have a strong opinion about it. I don't like to
Yeah.
express myself when I don't have a strong opinion.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I feel like one of the ones that's really interesting to me is it's the ones like Midjourney, which I'm sure
Mm.
you've heard about.
I've heard
And
about, but actually I haven't checked it out yet.
it
Quite.
really, really good. But what's crazy about that is how the more descriptive you are, the perfect you can like get the picture to turn out to be. And I'm
Right.
sure you've seen the pictures where with Trump and they were putting him in prison, and on Twitter it had to be like, this is an AI model. And
Yeah.
then also there's the conversation about how what will happen to licensing, what will happen to copyright in the future, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because if you look at, I think Adobe released their own version of this.
Yeah.
However, they have no licensing. So if you type in Pikachu, it can't produce a Pikachu. It has to produce something different. And it
Yeah,
turns out
exactly.
very, very wrong. So I feel like with AI, there will be this whole like discussion and this new field of like copyright licensing. I can just imagine in the future, like actors being like, yeah, let me just sign away my licensing away and you can use it across XYZ, and every time it's
Yeah.
used I get a penny or whatnot. Or
Yeah,
same
yeah.
with maybe books and whatnot. So it'll be very, very interesting to
Which is
see.
an interesting angle that Web3 can take in connection with AI, by the way. The
Yeah.
whole licensing and proof of and proof basically
Ownership and all that stuff.
ownership, yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
could be done via Web3. As like
Yeah.
I said, sorry to jump back to what we were discussing earlier, but yeah, Web3 is gonna have another boost at some point
Yeah.
when people figure out how to make it a real product,
Yeah.
not just a
I've
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it has to be one of those things where you need it can't like same. I'm sure it was the same for the internet where it can't just be reliant on the internet. There has to be something to be on the internet to then make the internet
yeah,
the most used thing there is. And one of the things
yeah,
was data being put on the internet. So obviously, if there's more blogs, more articles, and stuff being put on the internet, then people are going to go there. If there's more
exactly,
forums, because that's how it started, right? It started off with these forums, and then
exactly,
those
yeah,
forums turned into, like multi international chat forums, which then someone was like, hey, why don't we make this into like a thing where you can just connect with people in your Harvard University, and then from
yeah,
Harvard University it went to like Facebook, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
and it'll probably be the same with Web3, where it will have to take that something else has to push it. It can't just be reliant on Web3 hype or stuff like that. And I think
exactly, yeah, yeah,
like we said, I think data is going to be even more like the new oil essentially. And with AI on top of that, you'll have loads of other opportunities. You know, if you're a business and entrepreneur, opportunities for yourself, but problems that will need to be solved, such as copywriting, licensing, and
exactly,
all
yeah,
these
yeah,
other things.
yeah.
So yeah, and I guess you mentioned with Web3, you expect there to be another big
Yeah,
big
like you
big
said,
boom.
as soon as people start, figuring out what's actually useful for, because there was a period I feel like with Web3 where everybody was like, I can build this on the internet, but Web3 is the hype. And especially in startups, you need to follow the hype because that's where the money is. So like, why don't I build it in Web3 when it could be very easily built on web? Like it didn't really need that Web3. It could have Web3, but it really needed. So I think there's going to be, I don't know the time frame, but I think as people start to build products and try um, sort of applications of Web3, that's going to be more and more popular, possibly to the tune of the internet. Another thing to consider is that yeah, that's going to start getting regulated as well. So like AI, last year Web3 was free flowing and coins here and there, and then you know when it gets like that, it sort of becomes hard to keep track of. You're like with AI now, like I struggled. Like there's so much going on every day that you physically cannot be up to date on everything. So
Yeah,
that's going to slow down, and then it's going to take a more sustainable growth approach.
yeah. Do you feel like the hype? And I know this is kind of an old discussion, but it kind of relates to AI as well, where Do you feel like sometimes venture capital has played in that hype? Because I feel like there are loads of times where, because of the ecosystem that we're in, right? So
Mhm.
there has to be a pull and a push, right? There can never
Yeah,
be one or the other. So why are we having startups? Well, there's a problem that we're trying to solve. This is the economy, right? I solved the
yeah,
problem. You pay me for the services X, Y, Z. Sometimes I feel like with startups, it's got its own ecosystem, which is like, yep, I need to solve a problem, but then I need to prove that it's making money so I can sell it to the venture capital who's going to give us more money. And then that
yeah.
in its turn has a very vicious cycle. And I felt like with Web3, it very much was that. So we're a business, we're making money, but let's slap on Web3 on our title, and some venture capital guy who's, you know,
That's how I feel like some businesses, some startups will then possibly pivoted to, not doing it on Web3 and then I'm not sure, but that's how I feel like it sort of went. And in terms of the push and pull, I think trends are important because I mean VCs want to make money and startups want to make money and everybody wants to make money. So everybody sort of follows the money, right? The hype is generally where the money is. Hence, everybody is sort of forced to stay on that hype train, especially with the adoption like with the adoption of TikTok and Instagram. Everything is based on trends. Everything you buy, everything you see, every movie, it's based on trends. So I feel like it's a natural progression. There's definitely possibly VCs and startups who, because it's a thin line to balance, right? It's a thin line to keep your core values, but then try to stay on what's relevant in the industry. Being able to find that balance for your business, I think is very tricky. And I could I'm yet to be exposed to the VC side, but I assume it should be the same for VCs as well. Like the same way that a startup talks to 100 VCs before to invest, they talk to 100 startups before they invest in two. So it's a reversed funnel, but it's still the size is still pretty much the same.
yeah. No, it's true. Like we said, it's pull and push. You need both, so they kind of go
Yeah.
both hand in hand. And I guess kind of on the topic of VC, on the topic of funding, you mentioned that you were going through your first round of funding. How has that been? I guess what's the difference when you are trying to get funding? How is it propositioning your product, your company, compared to when you're selling it to a client?
Um, I mean, I feel like it's very different, but when you start to fundraise, it's a forcing factor for you to go really deep into the business because when you need to present it, you start getting asked questions. Okay, 5 years down the line, what are you guys planning to do? What verticals? How do you plan to sell it? What if it doesn't sell here? What's like how able are you to pivot into another industry quickly? So it 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 sort of forces you to really map out everything that maybe you don't, especially in the beginning when you're trying to focus on your technology, when you're trying to get some POCs, so proof of concepts out, and it can be it can be interesting. I am personally, for example, not involved in too many fundraising conversations, especially not the initial ones. And that's part of the separation of concern within the company. Sort of everything tech is me. And then in some fundraising conversations, I'm involved. A lot of VCs like to meet all the founders, for example, at some point, or meet the team and everything. But I used to be a little bit more involved and it's an interesting process. That's all I can say. It's because it's reliant on so many factors, right? Like it's reliant on the market, on the larger economy. What we're seeing now is not strictly because startups are in a bad position. It's because the economy is in a bad
Yeah.
position, and it's the availability of capital. And there's a lot of stuff going on. But something that I would say to very new entrepreneurs is you're gonna end up talking to a lot of investors, a lot of angels. It's tempting to for the first few ones to be like, this is the one we want. We need to follow this. It needs to be a sort of a marriage of sorts, like similar to the way that when you hire people, you're bringing them along for the journey. Once that VC invests in you, they're with you, right? For forever, or at least for quite a while, unless they exit in a subsequent round. So it's important to find people who see your business and your vision the same way you do. Uh, and then it depends also on personal preferences. That you might be somebody who wants them involved, who doesn't want them involved. There's there's a vast range of opportunities that you just it's one of those things where you need to be a bit patient. Like
Yeah.
it's not I know of people who I don't want to say have gotten lucky, but have managed to find sort of investment within the first few interviews, and they've told me this. Oh yeah, we got lucky because I was like, you asked, right? Like one thing about the entrepreneurial world is it's sort of like a big community.
Mm.
It's not like I feel like from the outside people see it as very cutthroat, but it's actually I'm talking to founders of similar or different businesses all the time, trying to learn from them, learn from their mistakes, and expressing our sort of our learnings in the process. And whenever you talk to people who have managed to get investment really early, they're like, "Yeah, we got a little bit lucky, to be fair, because we could have gone through another 50 before we found this one, but it just so happened like this." So there's a lot of variables to consider. There's really no one solution.
Yeah, I mean, I guess kind of turning this into a more, you mentioned like similar to hiring people, similar to choosing your co-founder, finding someone to invest in your companies is you need to marry them essentially. So I guess
Yeah.
on the topic of dating, what are some red flags you look for in
Wow.
investors? Because there must be somewhere you're like, what are those red flags?
Well, we try to look at their portfolio companies, and actually, ideally, if you know someone in their network who can give you sort of like a brief, friendly description of the type of investor that they are. Um, one of the Having too much process, for example, for small startups, for like seed funds, for us is a bit of a red flag. It just means that it's sort of a convoluted thing on the other side, and then everything you'll need to do, you'll have to go through bureaucratics on that side, and then there's what I feel like are really common ones is that if they're not super excited about your business, then possibly they're not the one.
Mm,
Um, or yeah, that's that's what I can say about the red flags of the dating
yeah.
VCs.
Has there been like any that you have been approached by where you've been like, because I guess kind of just to give more context to this is I feel like there are times where you're a founder, you're in a startup, and like you said, the economy is not doing well, and you're looking for that worthwhile moment, and then when you're at that low moment, you might just accept any deal, right? From any venture capital. So has there been moments where you've talked to VCs and you've been like, yeah, no, this person's not good for us. He won't add any benefit. Or has it been
Yeah,
more like, actually, we need to go into more detail and see if what there is?
I mean, the same way that I assume for VCs one call is not enough, you can't really do it off the back of one call. You definitely get a sense,
Mm,
but there's definitely been moments where we've progressed sort of in their pipeline, and then at some point we've sat down and we've decided this is probably not the best opportunity for us. This is might end up being counterproductive in the future, the way that they see business or being an investor. And again, I'm not, the reason why I'm not critical to any is because there's so many shapes and colors of startups and VCs that there's a match for everyone. And then when you match, the rest is actually not a match for you. But doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means that they're not the match for you. You know?
mm, mm.
So there's definitely been moments, yeah, um, with VCs and with some angels, in the early stages of fundraising and of the business in general. Angels is probably what most companies go for because of that lack of process and because of that sort of VCs have some parameters that they want you to have, which are not really there in the beginning. And angels offer a lot more of a hands-on experience, right? They're sort of an advisor to you as well.
Yeah.
Uh, so with that is a bit more easy because one of the things that you're trying to do when you're trying to understand a VC is, yeah, you talk to person X, but then there's 30 people in the company, right? And then you don't know the other 29. Might be a great guy, but you don't know, like, it's hard. Whereas when you're talking to an angel investor, it's the angel, it's that person, and you can gauge a much better understanding of how he views your business and investing in general, and possibly life in general.
Yeah. So I guess like I mean it's the angel you're only dealing with one person only. Their philosophy, their thoughts is you know what you're getting.
Most of the time, yes, yeah, most of the
And
time.
then with VCs or any other big like private equity, it's yeah the person dealing with your account might be nice. He might be whining
Hmm.
and dining you, telling you you're amazing, but his boss might be like, yeah, nah, we're not gonna give them that much, or we're gonna try undercut them because we know we can and X Y Z. So
Exactly,
you're
yeah.
put
There's
in a very different position, and you have to
mhm.
like know what position you're in.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely, yeah. You described it very well. There's when you're talking to especially large VCs, you have the front man, and then there's a whole infrastructure behind them that you get to meet a few. So it's generally not just one. You get to meet a few, but it's still trickier to understand the sort of the values that they have. Whereas with one person, you're just dealing with one person. And there's instances, by the way, as I'm sure you know, that there's syndicates of angels where angels get together and sort of form uh, little ventures, and then you're actually dealing with an angel, but for structuring purposes, it's actually an entity and stuff like that. But mostly with angels, it's much more straightforward, and the checks are smaller. So,
Yeah.
it's less money that they're risking, uh, but it's actually, sorry, last thing, when you meet with an angel and they decide to invest, it's sort of a greater joy because they're more likely than not investing their own money, like they're putting
Mm.
their own risk. A VC fund has raised the fund from other people and it's giving you some of that money. It's not really their money. They get their pay at the end of the
Yeah.
month. Whereas this person believes in you so much and in the business so much that they gave you their money. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword though, because if it goes
yeah,
well, they're super happy. But
yeah,
if they're not a very pleasant person and it goes to shits, which, startups, there's always going to be, you know, moments where things are very, very bleak due to, like you said, the economy's not going well and stuff's a little bit harder. They might just not be very, very happy at that moment.
yeah, yeah. Um, Well, for that, I'll have to wait a couple of years and see how our journey goes
Yeah.
from now to then. But yeah, I can imagine them not being really happy, and I wouldn't be very happy. But at the same time, it is a risky investment that you're going into, right? Like it's conscious from both sides that this is risky. It's risky for us. It's risky for people working in a startup, but the rewards are so much bigger. Uh, so you're playing that game really on
Yeah.
both sides. But as long as everybody's putting their full effort and being transparent, I feel like everything else is resolvable.
Yeah. I kind of want to move this conversation somewhere close home. So have you been to Albania? I'm guessing you go to Albania every summer, like all of us, or do you not get the opportunity as much now because you're
I so you know how I don't know if it was the same for you, but COVID was a bit of a blessing for me, right?
okay?
Because it introduced work from home, and I figured out that I could leave in June and come
Yeah,
back in August and work from Albania, which was
perfect.
phenomenal. Um, I don't do that as much now, but I try to take over the summer. I try to take 2, 3, 4 weeks to work from home because it's just on a personal level, it's healthier.
Mm.
It's the climate is different. It's being close to some family, some friends. It's a bit of a change of environment as well. Uh, Something that I personally need, for example, in my life is just to sort of take a little break from London, which I find to be an intense city at times. And yeah, but to be honest, I try to travel to Albania as much as I can. Like I said, I'm here now because I don't like to travel during high season. So luckily, in the last few years, we've started getting cheap flights to Albania, which was not a thing when I started, right? So if I find an opportunity where I could, take a short weekend. Yeah, I'll go take a break, see my family, eat some food, and then come back slightly fatter.
Yeah. Are you keeping are you keeping your ear down to that the business scene, the startup scene in Albania? Is that something that, since going through your own journey, is that something that you've been like, I want to see what's going on back home? Is that been a thing?
That's yeah, yeah, definitely been a thing. It's interesting because when you start to go in startups and entrepreneurship, you start seeing everything as not an opportunity, but you definitely start seeing like, oh, this could be a thing
Yeah.
that people build, right? And in Albania, you definitely see it with a different eye when you go from, working in London, which is most of the things is very high tech, and then you go back home and it's not as high tech, which means that there's a lot of opportunities to be had. So I try to keep my ear down. I don't know of any major development so far, but going forward, I'd like to sort of be as involved as I can or as helpful as I can in creating that community in Albania as well. Because in my opinion, it's um, it's full of talent and it's undiscovered talent, and us Albanians abroad sort of have first pick on the talent.
Mm.
So it's yeah, I'd just like to help.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there like any advice you would give? Because I feel like now with the internet, now with everything, uh, it's less gated. As long as you have
Yeah,
connections, you can do something. You can connect with people. You can build something. Is there any tips or tricks you would give, I guess, to Albanians back home who want to do their own startup or entrepreneurial journey?
yeah. Um, it would be the same sort of advice that I gave earlier for students in their first job, which is basically try and look, because the opportunities are there. Don't take my word for it. Like if you search, you will find them. And I off the top of my head, I don't remember, but I know that there's different programs from the EU or other foundations running sort of short um, conferences that could be an into the whole world. Because one of the things that I feel like might happen in Albania is sometimes you sort of raise your head and you're like, there's nothing here to help me. But like you said, with internet and with the world being mostly digital nowadays, there's opportunities out there for you to try. And then um, I would encourage people to start small and start building and not ideate too much in the beginning. Like there's definitely value in trying to think about, okay, I want to do this, but if you keep getting stuck in the idea phase, just try something. The latest idea, pick one, try it. You'll learn so much by trying, by actually getting into details, that you'll be able to maybe not build that idea, but build a better one along the way.
Mm.
So it's like anything else. It's just getting started. It's a difficult bit.
Yeah, there's some of my favorite what's it called, like inspiration to take from, especially if I'm looking for ways to suggest for Albanians back home, is if you look at like Southeast Asia, like Thailand, Vietnam,
Hmm.
Malaysia, massive. Obviously, they're massive countries, but loads of American people who are from originally there and then they go back there, and a lot of them, what they do is they just redo what has already worked in America, such
Yeah,
as an Uber, but they
yeah,
do it with the local customs and culture and everything in that country, and it works out 100 times better because
yeah,
Uber do not have the. I mean, they do have the resources, but they're not gonna spend all that time and money to learn about the culture. They don't know, and there's like so
yeah,
many stories of people doing that. I think I forget the guy's name. I do need to remember it, but he set up an Uber competitor, and they now do everything like Uber Eats, messaging, all that
yeah,
stuff in Malaysia because he just went back. He created the same simple app, built from that, and
yeah,
then went on. And I feel like in our culture in Albania, something like that could work because there is that difference of culture. And like you said, tech is still new. People are still learning. So why don't we add our own flair to it? And I feel like
absolutely, yeah,
that's where like most young people in Albania could probably take from, instead of like creating something new. Just take what's already working, you know
yeah,
whether it's a
yeah,
marketplace, whether it's an Uber app, whether it's an Uber Eats app. I do not know many people in Albania who use Uber Eats, but imagine,
But there's somebody has done that actually. I think it's called Baboon.
right. So there
Yeah,
you go. But stuff like
yeah,
that, I feel like that's the best place to start. Is start with something that's already working and just make it a little bit better to differentiate
yeah,
yourself,
yeah.
and
Make
then
it better, make it adapt it to what the culture is, how things work in that specific culture. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, no, no worries. And I guess kind of just coming to the end of this, wh- we always talk about good advice, and I think that's very important. But let's talk about bad advice. What has been the worst advice you've been given,
Ooh,
that you've taken and you've been like, that mother, why did I do it?
uh, well, I'm gonna have to have a think about it to be honest with you because I don't believe because the thing about bad advice is you can learn something from it, if anything, right?
Right.
Like when somebody gives you bad advice, you go forward and you're like, okay, but why did I trust it? Right? Like what was wrong in my process of trusting it that you can sort of take as good learnings from it. So I don't I don't think I've been given too much bad advice, or at least there's not a memorable thing that I'm like, yeah, that was stupid. But I think my view on it would be, even if it's bad advice, even if you followed it, uh, try to make the best out of it.
Mm,
You did, you did follow that advice. There was some reasons why you trusted that person or that entity or that organization. Figure out why that was wrong, so you don't repeat it in the future, right? Because one of the things is everybody has an opinion on almost everything, so it's hard to differentiate. And that bad advice, more likely than not, will have been well intended.
yeah,
So it's if you can make anything out of bad advice, learn how to recognize bad advice.
yeah. I guess with what you just said and kind of leading up to it is, has there been any mistakes that has been made across your entrepreneurship journey that in without realizing at that time, but have been like the biggest blessing in disguise?
Uh, one of the things that we struggled with in the beginning, and I take the heart mostly because it was on the tech side, is that we when you're trying to build something every time, you're trying to build it perfect, right? Well, that's not exactly the strategy you should go for in the beginning. You should strive for building fast and being able to deliver fast. Forget about the perfections. The person who uses it is going to tell you exactly what they want much better than you can ever imagine it, right? So one of the things that we sort of did in the beginning was this over engineering, and to be fair with you, parts of it, even though it was a mistake at the time, we're now lucky to have in our tech stack, and it's enabled us to be sort of quite forward in the tech journey, to allow us to build fast and build quickly in terms of infrastructure and everything. But if there's one thing that I think was one of our early sins, was definitely trying to build big and perfect. We like to use an expression which is move fast and break things, which we didn't by any means invented. I think it's pretty much a
I think
startup,
I think it's Facebook.
possibly, yeah,
I think it
possibly
might
might be
be.
Mark, yeah.
Yeah.
But we like to stick by that because that's especially in the initial stages, like your understanding of the business and in sort of your not your vision, but definitely your understanding of the business changes every 2 weeks. So if you have to start from scratch every 2 weeks without finishing anything, it's going to be really hard.
Mm, mm. Mate, that's some solid advice right there. And I guess kind of just to end things off, are there any book recommendations you would give people that you've been reading over the last few years?
Um, there's a couple, again, off the top of my head. I should have probably prepared this because I'm not renowned for my memory. But a really good one is Thinking Fast and Slow by I don't remember who. It's a very famous one, so I don't think
Yeah.
very few people will have heard it for the first time, but it's really interesting to understand your own perception of things and how you can learn basically from what your brain does automatically going forward. But yeah, I'm unfortunately going to have to stick to that one because
It's
my memory fails me.
it's a very good book. I've
Yeah.
tried reading it loads of times, but I think I'm thinking too slow.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time. There you have it, folks. An engaging chat with Keidi. From Imperial College to entrepreneurial success, we've brewed a strong blend of insights today. Keep your teacups ready though for more in the next episode of Tea with ALSA. Until then, remember, every moment is a chance to brew something great.